Hi there, everyone. Welcome to 2022, a discussion about the Form 941. I'm Ken Braverman. I'm the host of this channel and my own website on kenbraverman.com. I do a lot of different videos. A lot of them have a Microsoft Excel aroma to them. One of them is the small business payroll application that I have in Microsoft Excel. So I was looking through all the videos that I've done in this area over the last 12 or 13 years. And I was looking at different things that are popular, that people care about. Federal withholding is obviously a really big issue. How do you calculate federal withholding for your small business? And today I'm going to focus on one right here, the Form 941. I have a video with about 1,500 views from 2020. It is a great time to go over the 941, so let's do that, and I'll explain why. We're going to do a line-by-line discussion of the 941 and how do you fill it out, and how do you put the numbers in here, because I have a payroll application that basically automates a ton of this and calculates all the numbers for you, so you can just put them right on the PDF. But I want to talk about this, and then also the Schedule B, which is pretty easy to understand, but if you're someone who has to deposit a couple days after your pay period because you have a larger size payroll for a larger small business, at least in terms of wages, then you would also need to fill out the Schedule B, and how the Excel file relates to the Schedule B is what I'll also talk about as well. So let's get to it. So if you're a business and you need to pay your taxes like any other business would, the government will find you if you don't pay your payroll tax on time. They will find you, and they will assess penalties, and they will assess interest, and they will get their money. That is how this works. So you have to fill this one out. This is a big one for every business. Well, what do you do? Let's just go right through it. We're going to do it as fast as we can while also being clear about what we're talking about and going over any potential hiccups you might have. All right? So put in the number of your business, whatever it is, right? Put in your name. We don't need to focus on that, or address. That's all you. Here, they update this every quarter. This box up here about what quarter are you filing. They actually change this around throughout the year so that you're not easily able to replicate a form and file one for a previous quarter and send it in late. They want you filing these things on time. That's why they'll adjust this. So it's available for Q1 right now because I'm filming this in May of 2022. Now, let's start answering questions. Number of employees that received wages or tips on this date. Well, they just want to know how many people were working. We're going to kind of go line by line as we compare to this payroll file that I have right here. So in this payroll file, we've got one employee, me, and I put a bunch of wages in here. This is the payroll file you can subscribe to. Lifetime subscription's $199. And you get access to this thing at all times, and you can download it, and as I update it in New Year's and stuff, you can keep downloading it, and it'll be changing for the new year and all kinds of stuff as I keep working on this file, because it's resourceful for so many businesses across the country and for personal use. So anyway, within this file, I've got one employee I'm paying, looks like $500 a week on a weekly pair is what's going on right here. Well, in our quarterly report, if we want to just look at what it looks like blank, you can choose the period of time in your 941 report sheet. Well, we need to file Q1, January, February, March. Everything's going to fill itself in automatically, but we're going to talk a little bit about how we got these numbers. Where did they come from? What do they mean? All right, so there's a number of 13,970 apparently that needs to go right here. And usually they do want pennies on this one because there happens to be this weird thing for adjustments for fractions of a cent, which occurs when you are charging these rates of Social Security and Medicare. They sometimes result in fractions of cents. So when you sum them all up, you're weird and you're off by a few pennies, and there's nothing you can do about it. So they actually have this line for adjustments of fractions of cents somewhere, wherever the heck it is. I'll find it in a second. Can't ever see. There we go. This stuff, and there's also for different types of sick pay and leave wages, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the point is they actually do want pennies on this one. A lot of federal forms, they don't want the decimal numbers and just want to round to $1, but it's really, that would make it even more difficult for rounding. So they just put in, they want actual pennies there. All right, so that's good to know. Next, those wages amount wages are, I'm not going to have a really long discussion about what is taxable wages and what's not taxable, because that's a whole other video, and it's a discussion about the Circular E, publication 15, which really discusses what is taxable and what kind of withholdings or deductions are not taxable. But this is the taxable amount. They really should be saying taxable wages and tips, not just wages and tips in this line. I've always had a minor complaint about that because it is a bit confusing, and there's also non-residents sometimes that don't have their income included in here. That's another issue. That's probably why they don't put that word taxable wages in front of it, because it has different meanings to different people. Next, so when you figure out what those wages are, they go right there. Federal tax withheld from wages. So there's three types of taxes that are mainly being discussed on this form. They are federal income tax. That's the one when you file your taxes at the end of the year and you file your 1040, you owe federal income tax for you. That's the kind of federal income tax they're withholding from your pay, and that's what goes right there. Right? What was it, like $14.60 or something? So that's what federal is. The other two types of taxes that are being discussed and being taxed here are Social Security and Medicare. Often referred to these, they call these guys FICA. FICA, I believe, was the acronym for the legislation of the act, I believe, that initiated this type of charge. And so Social Security is, when you're retired or when you get older, if you hit a certain age and you've worked enough, the government gives you a certain amount of money. That's Social Security. You got to pay into that fund. They're charging 12.4 or 6.2% the employer pays and 6.2% the employee pays, which is why it adds up to 0.124. So the Social Security is the one type of tax. The other one's the Medicare, which is at 1.45, right? Yeah, 1.45% but for the employee and 1.45% for the employer, to add up to 2.9%, which is right there. And then they've also started to make things a little complicated here on the 2022 Form 941, and I'll discuss what these items are because they are new and they didn't exist in previous years. When I look back at previous videos that I'd done about the 941, those lines weren't there. These guys weren't here, and I'll explain what they are because you should know. So I think we basically went over the three types of taxes that are on here: federal, Social Security, and Medicare. And this form is reconciling those with what you actually paid as the grand total for the quarter to make sure that you paid it right. That's what this form is all about. So those wages go right here. I'm not going to waste our time by typing them in because who cares? But so you can see they're here, and the calculation is done, and you have to then put that number over here, what these amounts are. And when you do all that, you are going to get a total. But let's now talk about these real quick. What is this qualified sick leave, qualified family leave? The answer is it's a very, very annoying piece of legislation that applied to specific type of wages during the whole COVID situation for certain periods of time, related to not even this year, related to 2020 and 2021 in both instances. So this is an accountant's nightmare. It's an accountant's nightmare. It really is. Because you have to then look at previous year's wages and figure out if they were taxed at this reduced rate or not, which is apparently, somebody got away with not paying Social Security tax on their wages here. Is what happened. Now, I do not support this automatically in the file. I only have placeholders for it, because I don't know what your wages were in a previous year of this file, and to build an application to connect that would be complicated. So I'm leaving it out because this will phase itself out eventually. Eventually, these wages won't apply to future quarters, and credits and stuff like that will phase themselves out. So if these apply to your business and you need help putting it in the file, I can discuss that. But whether it's going to be in the main template version, I'd say no. I'd say this goes away hopefully next year. Now, taxable Social Security tips. Tips are a little different than wages and tips, which is kind of confusing, right? They said wages, tips, and other compensation. And then down here, they're like taxable Social Security tips. Like, what? Well, in different industries, like restaurant industry, where people work on tip basis, cash, and that's a very big percentage of their paycheck is the tip amount, which sometimes is taken home in cash. paying Social Security on that money sometimes is a little bit more difficult, and there's different ways of reporting it. So this is a different number here for those people. I have a spot in the Excel file for this for tips right here under daily entry. So if it's a different type of compensation, this is that special tips. That's not other tips that's included in your other compensation right here. You don't want to double count and put your tips in both spots, because then you're going to pay double the tax or double the Social Security, I guess, on it. Anyway, so that's what tips are. Then there's this weird Medicare. Medicare we talked about enough. It's the same thing. Social Security has a maximum. Sorry, I forgot about that. Social Security has a maximum for the year, and once wages go over that, they're not subject to Social Security anymore. We have that here in the file. And off the top of my head, I think the number is like 130-something thousand. We're going to find out real quick. It is, starting to look through all the different formulas we have here, I'll be able to tell you Social Security wage base. 147,000 is what the maximum is this year in 2022. It goes up every year for cost of living adjustments, and it's at 147,000. So anything over 147 per employee, that's only per employee, would start to not go here as a Social Security wage, even though they received it as other wages, tips, and compensation here, because it's still money they got, but it's now over that maximum. So the reason why I brought that up is Medicare has no maximum, and it's even got worse than no maximum. It's actually got an additional Medicare tax that they charge. If you make over $200,000 a year and you're just the employee, you've got to submit this other 0.9% of that supplemental wages. So it is the opposite of a regressive tax. It is a wealth tax almost. If you make too much on your W-2 wages, you pay more Medicare. So there you go. That is there. Now, it then totals everything up. It says add up all the columns that it's saying to add up, right? And it's gonna add up everything that you should have paid based on the wages you reported, and that's going to go in line 5E. If you got a notice about owing something here, because so many people have a problem with that, they even have a line on the 941 to discuss your notice. Be like, hey, did you get a notice? Do you already owe us? Are you trying? Yeah, they have that line right there. Then the subtotal to 2. Okay, so now you got subtotal. Now here's that fractions of a cent adjustment that I was talking about before. It's automatically calculated here. You know, it says it's 1 cent in our scenario. But it's just like when you actually, paid everything and what the wages were, the total wages, there's just this weird problem where the rounding that occurred because of this actual hard rate right here, it creates fractions of a cent variances, and you have to look at it. It's one of the most annoying parts of filling this form out manually is figuring out what that is, because you don't know why it happened. It just happened because of a rounding error. So there's also now adjustments for the sick pay, because that is a wage also multiplied by a rate, so it could have a same variance. So they created a line for that. Current quarters adjustments for tips and group, same problem, right? Same annoying, just we're multiplying something by a rate in two different ways, and we have to also create a line. So these are wasted lines right here. This is all pennies adjustments that are just annoying people to get things completely accurate. That's actually what's going on. Anyway, so total taxes after adjustments. It sums up all the taxes right there. Okay, and keep in mind you can follow along in the payroll file if you own one and see the exact flow of the formulas and what it's doing. It gets your total taxes after adjustments right there. Now, qualified small business payroll tax rate. So this is a whole other form which I don't have supported in the Excel file, but if you had this happen to your business, you could put an amount there. Non-refundable portion qualified. This is all this nonsense wage stuff from last year that may or may not be applicable to qualified and sick leave. Just a disaster for accountants. Like I said, makes you want to pull your hair. That's why accountants are bald, because they're pulling their hair out all day being like, are you serious? I got to look at last year's wages to find pennies. Like, leave me alone. Anyway, reserve for future years. Yeah, let's just put something. Okay, can't you just get rid of that? I mean, I used to work at the IRS. I'm allowed to complain. A long time ago. They're good folks, actually. I think everyone that I came into contact, they were generally good folks, and that goes for. So I don't complain too much about them. Anyway, part 1. Here's a bunch of other questions. We're still going here. More non-refundable credits. and COBRA stuff that really is hardly going to apply to your business in most instances. Total deposits for the quarter. So 13A is a really important number. 13A is the one where you have to type that in yourself. So this is what you actually paid. This is when you pull out your bank statement and you look at, or you, however you look at, you go online and you look at what you actually paid the government when you made your EFTPS payments, which you should be doing. If you don't know about doing that, you're way behind in this video. But you do need to be making those payments, and what the total of those payments were for the quarter is what you're actually going to type right there. Like, did we make these payments exactly right? If we do, then we'd have no balance due. What if I paid too much? That never happens. Then I'd be getting 400 back, or I'd be able to have a credit. What if I paid too little? Then I'd owe this, plus interest and penalties, depending on when it was. So that's the number you got to type in yourself right here. So that's a huge number. They should make it even more bold than it is. I don't know why we're reserving stuff for future use. Refundable portion of credit, this stuff that probably doesn't apply to you, more refunds of credits, and then you get what you owe. All right? So you're done with a lot of this form, except for the part about your actual payments and when you made them, because they want to double check that you put that payment number in there right and how you got there. So some people that are smaller businesses can just fill this out and say, I paid this much each month and this is what I paid, right? And I was good. Whatever. You can do that if you apply for that and you are a monthly scheduled depositor. That's going to be gross receipts under, I don't want to say the number because I don't know off the top of my head, but it's going to be if you're depositing less than tens of thousands of dollars for sure per month, for sure. And I think it's less than thousands of dollars, honestly. I think it's less than 10,000, but don't quote me on that. Look it up. So the point is you end up making this deposit schedule with the government when you set up your business. If you're doing more money, you're a semi-weekly depositor, and you hit that, and you do not need to fill this part out. You need to fill out the Schedule B. And the Schedule B I also have right here, and that's just going to ask you for your business information. You're also going to click the box, and then you're going to put the day you actually deposited the money. And you can be off by a couple days because of the transfer of the money, but the day you initiated the deposit is fine. And it's got to be within a couple days of your, like 2 or 3 business days of when your end of your pay period was. So in this scenario, how do you view that in the payroll file and how do you know that's right? There's a few ways to do that. One is you can get rid of the quarter and just go one pay period at a time. And you'd see that this pay period, the payment that was made was not that. The payment that should have been made was 6/30/70. So whenever that date was of 1/7, you would put it right here of 6/30/70. And of course they do want pennies here because you're going to have that rounding fraction of a cent problem, and they absolutely need pennies here to figure out exactly what that is. So you fill out this for all the quarters and sum it up. Now there's an even easier way to look at this through here, which is using the pivot reporting functions and the dynamic pivot functions. And the dynamic pivot function will allow you to sort things out by quarter and by pay period and move things directly in order and allow you to see exactly what your deposits were in every pay period and quarter. So it's basically anything you can do with that. I'm kind of sorting things out right now to show you how that works. You can add slicers for quarter, for example. So I'm going to just add a slicer for the quarter because quarter is already an option here. I can't search that way. Interesting. Used to be able to search. I know I'm dragging a little bit in the video here, but I just want to show you how much easier it is. It's not easy if I can't find it fast. You used to be able to search a search bar here because I have the word quarter as one of the titles of the columns, and I just can't see it. Because remember, I'm blind. I do all this being basically blind. That's why it's so good, because I can't actually look at what I'm doing. I have to just remember. That's why I make things easy to use. Where's the quarter? All right, now I'm annoyed. All right, you can open up the field list. Yeah, I can do it here. Sorry, duh. There it is. It's quarter. So we're going to put quarter right here. We're also going to create a slicer for quarter to show you how easy this is. Q1 is what I wanted to show you, are all these pay periods. So if we were depositing in every one of these periods of time, the amount would be the 941 tax, which is also a line. It is right here. You can move these things around in a pivot table as well. So the 941 tax that we're going to be putting on the Schedule B at these dates, right, is this amount. So on the 14th, it's 793, right? This 114 is 793, whatever it was. So you can see how easy it is to look at in the areas of the dynamic pivot as well when you just structure the dynamic pivot to show you exactly what you want. So anyway, so that's the 941, that's the Schedule B part. You subtotal all that up, and they're going to ask for that number. But that number is going to be the total number that goes on here. So the 941, you got to mail this in. You got to sign this thing down here. You do it yourself. Put your name, put your date, and if you owe any money, it's going to show up, and you got to pay it. But hopefully you did it right and made the deposits correct all the way throughout the quarter because you used my payroll file and you got it right. But if you didn't, you can use the payroll file to figure out what you owe so that you know ahead of time before you start working on the report and start filling out the PDF. All right, guys, that's the 941 video for 2022. I hope it gets over 1,000 views because it should. I mean, my 941 videos, I had one that got almost 1,500 views from 2020. Let's beat that. Let's get over 1,500 for this one. All right, good luck. The payroll should be easy, so just make